A simple man saved a lady from sinking sand. Unaware she is a billionaire CEO, he changed his life immediately. The morning felt very ordinary, yet strange. Jason Miller, a man in his early 40s with sun-hardened hands and a calm, thoughtful face, had lived in the same modest cottage on the edge of a sleepy town deep in the Texas countryside for nearly 2 decades. That morning, like so many others, he woke before the sun, brewed a pot of coffee, and stepped out onto his creaky porch. The sky was still soft with dawn, a blend of peach and pale blue. He sipped his coffee slowly, then pulled on his boots and set out on his usual morning walk, a ritual he kept to clear his mind before the day's work began. The wooded trails behind his property twisted along the edge of a dried-up creek bed, once fed by spring rains. It had been a dry year, and though the underbrush was thick, the ground crunched beneath his feet. Jason carried a small backpack. Just water, a pocket knife, some rope, and a flashlight, though he rarely used them. But something was different that morning. As he followed the trail deeper into the brush, a strange stillness fell over the land. Even the birds had quieted. Jason paused. The hairs on his arms stood up. Then, suddenly, a scream. High-pitched, frantic, female. It came from somewhere up ahead, sharp and desperate, slicing through the trees like a warning bell. Jason didn't hesitate. He took off running, heart pounding, dodging low branches and pushing through thick shrubs. He didn't know what he was running toward, but instinct had already taken over. Less than a minute later, he saw her. A woman, mid-30s, blonde hair soaked and plastered to her face, mud up to her waist, was sinking fast in a patch of marsh he hadn't seen in years. It was hidden just beyond a bend in the trail, covered in tall grass and fed by an underground spring that still hadn't dried up. She was flailing, panic in her eyes, her designer blazer clinging to her body, one heel long gone. Jason dropped his pack, hit the ground flat, and reached out. "Don't move too much," he shouted. "I've got you. Just hold on." She was gasping, struggling to stay afloat in the heavy muck. Every movement dragged her deeper. Jason reached for the straps in his bag and quickly tied them into a makeshift rope. Bracing his feet against the base of a mesquite tree, he threw the strap toward her. "Grab it. Wrap it around your arm." She did, barely holding on. Jason pulled, inch by inch, his boots digging into the dirt. The resistance was brutal, like hauling cement. Her eyes met his, wide, terrified, but also trusting. Finally, with one last desperate yank, she came free from the sucking mud and tumbled forward, collapsing onto solid ground. They both lay there for a moment, breathless, covered in mud and sweat, surrounded by silence. She coughed and turned to him, her voice hoarse. "You saved my life." Jason sat up, checking to see if she was injured. "You all right? Anything broken?" She shook her head slowly. "No, just shaken." Jason helped her sit against a tree. He offered her water from his bottle and wiped mud from her forehead with a rag from his pocket. She looked like someone from another world. Her jacket was clearly expensive, her nails manicured, her smartwatch blinking with missed notifications. She didn't belong out here. "What were you doing out here alone?" he asked, finally. She hesitated, catching her breath. "I took a drive to clear my head. I thought I could hike a little. The GPS stopped working. I must have wandered off the trail." Jason gave a small nod, still puzzled. "You're lucky I came through when I did. That patch can suck a person down faster than you'd think." She gave a soft, disbelieving laugh. "Yeah, lucky." They sat in silence for a moment, the adrenaline slowly fading. Jason stood, offered her his hand, and helped her up. She was covered in mud from head to toe, but still held a quiet poise. "I'm Jason," he said. "Claire," she replied, brushing mud from her hair. He didn't recognize the name, and she didn't offer a last one. Jason led her back to the trail, walking slowly so she could regain her strength. She asked him simple questions: if he lived nearby, what he did for a living, how often he hiked these woods. He answered modestly, not realizing she was studying him just as closely. And just like that, the quiet life of Jason Miller had been cracked open. Jason led Claire carefully through the underbrush, guiding her with a hand under her arm. She was still shaky, mud-streaked and trembling, but upright. Her designer blazer hung heavy on her shoulders, soaked and clinging. She walked without saying much, occasionally stealing glances at Jason, this quiet, broad-shouldered man who had come out of nowhere and pulled her from death. About 15 minutes later, they reached a narrow stream that cut through the woods, its water clear and shallow, gliding over smooth stones. Jason had used it for years to wash up when working outside or hunting. Without saying a word, he knelt beside it, cupped his hands, and splashed water on his face, letting the coolness chase away the sweat and shock. Claire hesitated. "You can use it," he said gently. "It's clean. I've been drinking from it for 20 years, and I haven't grown a tail yet." She gave him a weak, grateful smile and knelt by the stream. Her hands dipped into the water, and she gasped from the chill, then began cleaning her face. She scrubbed at her arms, her neck, doing her best to regain composure. Jason turned away to give her privacy, pretending to adjust something in his pack. Neither of them noticed the silver smartwatch on her wrist begin to slide loose, its magnetic clasp weakened by mud. With one unconscious flick of her hand as she wiped her brow, it slipped. The small, sleek device dropped straight into the side pouch of Jason's unzipped backpack and vanished among tools and rope. She exhaled slowly. "Thank you," she said after a pause. "You didn't have to help me, but you did. That's rare these days." Jason glanced at her and shrugged. Would have been wrong to walk away. Claire smiled faintly, but said nothing. Her eyes drifted down to the stream, thoughtful. For a woman who looked like she belonged in a marble-floored boardroom, she seemed strangely out of place and alone. Jason cleared his throat. "You sure you're okay to keep walking? My place ain't far." "No," she said quickly, wiping her hands on what remained of her jacket. "Thank you, really. I think I've got enough strength now. There's a road not far from where I parked. I can find it." Jason hesitated. He didn't want to leave her alone again, but something in her tone said she'd made up her mind. "Well, all right," he said, "but at least take some water with you." He pulled a bottle from his bag and handed it to her. She accepted it with both hands, their fingers brushing slightly. A moment passed. Something unspoken lingered between them, like the pause before a curtain falls. "Jason, right?" He nodded. "I won't forget this." Then she turned and walked away, vanishing slowly between the trees, mud-streaked, proud, and carrying secrets like shadows. Jason stood there a moment longer, watching the spot where she disappeared. Then, with a faint shake of his head, he slung his backpack over his shoulder, turned back toward home, and let the mystery fade into the rustle of Texas leaves. Back at his cottage, Jason tossed the pack beside his workbench and headed for the kitchen. The day's heat had finally caught up to him. He stripped off his shirt, poured a glass of iced tea, and stood by the screen door, watching the wind ripple across the fields. The woman's face lingered in his mind, her expensive clothes, her distant eyes, her careful silence. He didn't know her last name, didn't know where she came from or why she'd been alone in that part of the woods. But somehow, it didn't feel like an accident. People like her didn't just go hiking in muddy Texas backwoods. Still, he wasn't one to chase ghosts. He chalked it up to a strange morning and turned to his tools, comforted by the familiar click of metal and oil. He had a tractor to finish by the weekend. Later that night, Jason sat in his shed going through the backpack. He pulled out the rope, his thermos, and then something cold and unfamiliar. He frowned and brought it to the light. It was a sleek, modern smartwatch drenched in dried mud, but still blinking faintly. He wiped the screen clean, revealing a small hairline scratch across the corner and a glowing message, "Connection lost." Locating. Jason stared at it, puzzled. He didn't own any kind of smartwatch. Hell, he didn't even have voicemail set up. He tapped the screen. Claire Industries, a logo flickered, a stylized C wrapped around a globe. Jason blinked. He had no clue what that meant. Just as he reached to set the watch aside, the screen lit up again. Incoming alert. Tracking offline. Last pinged location, unknown device. Jason frowned. Well, hell. He set the watch on his workbench and walked away from it. Technology had always made him uneasy. Things beeping and buzzing at random, tracking you, talking back. This thing felt like it belonged to another world. Back in the bustling city, Claire's mind raced as she sat at her sleek desk, tapping away on her keyboard. The hum of the city outside her high-rise window seemed like a distant world compared to the quiet chaos she had just experienced. The missing watch was more than just a luxury accessory. It was a vital piece of technology that recorded every important detail of the incident. It had captured the moment when she sank into the sand, and the moment when Jason had reached out, his hands pulling her out of the treacherous grip of nature. But there was more to it than just the footage. It had data. Data she couldn't afford to lose. She had spent hours trying to track the watch's location, using the device's built-in tracker. Her fingers flew over the digital map, zooming in and out, following the blip on the screen that seemed to be taunting her with its close yet unreachable distance. Then, finally, a breakthrough. The signal led her to a small neighborhood, far removed from the glitzy towers she was used to. Her heart beat a little faster, both with excitement and a hint of apprehension. What had she gotten herself into? The SUV purred to a stop in front of a modest house, one that contrasted sharply with her own opulent world. She stepped out, smoothing down the folds of her designer clothes, a mixture of elegance and confidence. She glanced at the small, unassuming house. It was a far cry from the polished, luxurious spaces she was accustomed to, but it was Jason's world, a man who, in the blink of an eye, had changed her life. Claire adjusted her sunglasses and walked toward the front door, heels clicking on the cracked sidewalk. She could see the faint outline of Jason in the window, his silhouette standing motionless. When she knocked, the door opened slowly, and there he was, Jason Miller, the man who had rescued her without even knowing who she was. His expression was a mixture of surprise and uncertainty as his eyes landed on the stranger who stood before him. He hadn't expected anyone, let alone someone like her. "Claire," she said, her voice calm yet assertive, offering a hand for him to shake. "Claire Donovan, you saved my life." Jason hesitated for a moment before taking her hand, his rough, calloused palm against her perfectly manicured one. His eyebrows furrowed as he tried to reconcile the woman in front of him with the one he had pulled from the sand. She was so different from the woman he had imagined would show up, dressed in high-end clothes and exuding an aura of power and wealth. I didn't expect," he trailed off, clearly lost for words. Claire smiled softly, a hint of empathy in her eyes. "I know. I'm not exactly who you thought I would be." She gestured to the SUV parked at the curb, then back to herself. "But I needed to find you. That watch you took, it's not just a watch. It recorded everything. The fall. The rescue." She paused, giving him a moment to absorb her words. "It's essential for me to get it back." Jason blinked, still processing. "Wait. What do you mean? It was just a watch. I didn't know it was important." Claire's gaze softened. "It's not just important. It's crucial to my work. The data it holds. I can't afford to lose it." Jason swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the situation. He hadn't known that the object he had grabbed from the sand was so much more than it seemed. To him, it had just been something shiny and expensive. Claire's tone shifted, a quiet intensity filling her words. "I'm here because I owe you my life, Jason. But I'm also here because I want to offer you something in return." She stepped closer, her voice steady but filled with purpose. "I have resources. I can help you build a better life than the one you have now. But only if you're willing to take that chance." Jason stood frozen, unsure of what to say. The offer hung in the air like a promise and a question. Would he take it? Could he even comprehend the kind of life she was offering? It seemed too far from his grasp, too foreign. Claire tilted her head slightly, watching him closely. "Think about it," she said softly. "I'm not asking for anything more than the chance to repay you." Jason took a deep breath, his mind spinning. What would this mean for him? For his future? He could hardly believe what was unfolding in front of him. For the first time in his life, the weight of a single decision felt incredibly heavy. And yet, it also felt like the start of something entirely new. Jason sat in the worn-out armchair by the window of his small living room, his fingers tracing the edges of the coffee mug as the morning sun filtered through the blinds. The world outside his humble home felt distant, like something that belonged to someone else. He lived in the same town he'd always known, and as far as he was concerned, his life was simple, predictable, and, above all, manageable. His days consisted of working on old engines, fixing what was broken, and living quietly with his thoughts. There was comfort in the routine, in the small but steady rhythm of life. But everything changed the moment Claire Donovan walked through his door. It felt surreal, as though the world had shifted on its axis. He had never been around people like her, people who seemed to have everything, a life full of ambition, success, and wealth. And yet, she had walked into his life as if it were just another day, her presence as commanding as the towering skyscrapers that dotted the skyline she called home. But despite the differences between them, there was something undeniably genuine about her, a warmth that had made him feel both seen and small at the same time. The memory of their first meeting still played in his mind like a vivid scene from a movie. He remembered her poised, yet vulnerable expression, the way she had confessed that the watch he had rescued had data far beyond its luxury status. He could still see the sincerity in her eyes as she had told him that he had saved her life, not just physically, but in a way that altered the course of her future. But what really lingered in his thoughts was her offer. She hadn't just thanked him for rescuing her. She hadn't come to simply express gratitude. No, she had seen something in him. Something more than the rough hands of a mechanic and the unkempt beard of a man who barely made ends meet. She had seen honesty. She had seen courage. And that had led her to extend an invitation he never could have imagined. That invitation had been to her headquarters in the city, a place he had only seen in pictures, a world he had never ventured into. It felt like a dream or a trap. But here he was, sitting in his quiet home, preparing himself for what felt like the biggest decision of his life. Claire had given him the details, but now, with her offer looming over him like a shadow, Jason found himself grappling with doubts he had never faced before. The knock on the door shattered his thoughts. He stood up quickly, heart thumping as he walked to the door. Claire had kept her word. She had arrived just as she had promised. She stood on his doorstep, her presence as commanding as ever, but now with an air of anticipation surrounding her. She looked every bit the woman who owned everything and everyone, powerful, unapproachable, but in her eyes, Jason saw that same warmth from their first meeting. "Jason," she said, her voice warm but direct. "Ready to come with me?" He hesitated for a moment, glancing back at the life he knew. The life of small-town comfort, the simplicity that allowed him to blend in, to not stand out. It was a life he had accepted, even if it hadn't always made him happy. But now, standing in front of this woman, the offer she had made seemed like something that could change everything. Jason stepped outside, locking the door behind him, and followed Claire to the waiting SUV. The vehicle gleamed in the sunlight, its sleek design the polar opposite of his beat-up truck. As they drove in silence, the city slowly grew closer on the horizon. Jason could feel the tension rise in his chest. This wasn't just a change in scenery, it was the beginning of a completely new chapter. As they entered the heart of the city, Jason's eyes widened. The buildings towered above him like giants, their glass exteriors reflecting the sky in a dazzling display. He had never seen anything like it before. He had seen pictures, of course, but the reality of it was overwhelming. The noise, the crowds, the hurried pace, it was all so different from the peaceful rhythm of his small town. But Claire didn't seem fazed by any of it. She navigated the chaos of the city like it was second nature, her composure unshaken. Finally, they arrived at her headquarters, a massive building that seemed to touch the sky. The entrance was guarded, the lobby bustling with activity. Jason felt like an intruder, like someone who had accidentally walked into a world that was never meant for him. But Claire, sensing his discomfort, gave him a reassuring glance as she led him through the lobby and into a private elevator. When the doors opened on the top floor, Jason was stunned. The view was nothing short of breathtaking, offering a panoramic view of the city that stretched as far as the eye could see. The office itself was sleek, modern, and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows that bathed the space in natural light. Everything about it screamed wealth and sophistication. "Welcome to my world," Claire said with a smile, her tone laced with both pride and something else, something softer. She led him into a conference room, where a table was already set with coffee and pastries. Jason felt a pang of anxiety, unsure of what to expect next. He had never been in a room like this, let alone in a place where deals were made, where people in suits and dresses ran the world. Claire sat across from him, her posture relaxed, her hands folded neatly on the table. "I know this is a lot to take in, but I want you to understand that I'm not offering you this job out of charity." "I don't do charity," she said, her eyes locking with his. "I'm offering you this because I believe in you." Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I'm not sure I understand. I'm just a mechanic. I've never worked in a place like this. I don't belong here." "You belong more than you think," Claire replied, her voice steady. "I need someone who can be trusted, someone who understands the value of integrity, of hard work. And that's you, Jason." She paused for a moment, letting her words settle between them before continuing. "I'm offering you a position as my personal mechanic and vehicle operations specialist. Full housing, benefits, and travel. You'll be responsible for maintaining all my vehicles, some of which are highly specialized. It's not an easy job, but I believe you have what it takes. And more importantly, I believe you'll rise to the challenge." Jason's mind raced. The offer was impossible to process. This was a world he had never even dared to dream of, a world of luxury and high stakes, of powerful people making decisions that shaped the future. He was just a simple man, a man who had never left his small town, and now he was being asked to step into a life he had never imagined. "Why me?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. Claire leaned forward slightly, her gaze steady. "Because I see in you something that money can't buy: honesty, courage, and a willingness to do what's right. I need someone who understands the value of that, someone who doesn't get distracted by the noise of the world around them. I need someone I can count on." Jason swallowed hard, the weight of her words settling over him. He thought about the simplicity of his old life, the comfort he had found in his routine. But he also thought about the way Claire had looked at him when she offered him the job, like he was more than just a mechanic, like he was someone who could make a real difference. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he admitted, his voice laced with uncertainty. "You don't have to be ready," Claire said, her tone gentle but firm. "I'm offering you a chance to grow, a chance to build something bigger than you ever imagined. But it's up to you whether you take that step. You won't be alone in this, Jason. I'll be here every step of the way." For the first time in a long while, Jason felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The possibility of change. Of more than just scraping by. He sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the decision heavy on his shoulders. Finally, he exhaled and looked up at Claire. "All right," he said, his voice steady. "I'll do it. I'll take the job." Claire's eyes softened, and she smiled. "Good. I knew you would." And just like that, Jason's life changed. Jason's first day at West Tech felt like stepping into an alternate reality, one where his old life, the life of grease-stained hands and quiet afternoons in a small town, seemed like a distant memory. The sleek, polished lobby of the West Tech building reflected the sunlight pouring through the glass windows, casting an ethereal glow on the marble floors. The hum of high-end technology surrounded him, a world of innovation and ambition he had never known. As he entered the building, he was greeted with respect. People in smart attire nodded at him, their faces unfamiliar but welcoming. There were no questions, no whispers about where he came from or how he had ended up there. They simply treated him like he belonged, like he was part of something much larger than himself. It was strange, and yet, in a way, it felt natural. Claire had made good on her promise. She didn't just offer him a job, she had given him a purpose. His hands, which had once fixed rusted engines in the back of a dusty shop, now worked on cutting-edge machines that hummed with futuristic energy. The tasks were challenging, far more complicated than anything he had encountered before, but that spark of excitement he hadn't felt in years reignited within him. Every day presented a new challenge, a new puzzle to solve. And with each solved problem, Jason felt a deeper connection to his work, a sense of pride and accomplishment he never thought possible. The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Claire had flown him out to different cities, San Francisco, New York, even Tokyo, to work on advanced prototypes, to fine-tune systems that would soon revolutionize the automotive and tech industries. Every flight, every new city, was an experience he could barely process. The streets of Tokyo, with their neon lights and bustling crowds, seemed like a dream. The sleek skyline of New York looked nothing like the small-town houses he had known. And yet, no matter where he went, he had a purpose. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was part of something groundbreaking, something that felt bigger than anything he had ever imagined. At first, Jason was hesitant, unsure of how to navigate the high-stakes world around him. But Claire's unwavering belief in him made all the difference. She never treated him like an outsider, never made him feel like he didn't belong. Every step of the way, she supported him, challenged him, and encouraged him to push past his limits. Slowly, the walls of uncertainty he had built around himself began to crumble. On a crisp autumn afternoon, after a successful week of traveling and working on new technology, Jason found himself walking alongside Claire through the lush gardens outside West Tech headquarters. The trees were turning shades of amber and gold, and the air was fresh with the scent of blooming flowers. Jason looked around, marveling at the peace and beauty of the space. This garden, this world, was so different from the worn-out paths of his small town, yet it felt like he was finally in the right place. They walked in silence for a few moments, side by side, the weight of their shared journey between them. Claire, in her tailored suit, still exuded the air of power and sophistication. But beside her, Jason felt different, equal. The distance that had once separated them, The vast gap between his old life and her world no longer felt like an insurmountable divide. They were two people who had crossed paths at the right moment, and now they walked through life together. "Thank you," Jason said quietly, his voice sincere. "For everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." Claire glanced at him, her smile soft but full of understanding. "You saved my future, Jason, but you also saved my soul. I don't think I ever realized how much I needed someone like you." Jason nodded, the words resonating in ways he couldn't fully explain. He had come here to fix machines, but in doing so, he had found a piece of himself he didn't even know was missing. His hands still worked with the same precision, the same dedication, but now he had something more, a sense of belonging, a purpose that wasn't just about survival. As they reached the end of the path, the garden stretching out behind them, the camera zoomed out, capturing the two of them walking side by side, the world around them vibrant and alive. A soft voiceover began, a reflection on everything they had become. "Sometimes, the richest people don't wear suits," the voice said. "And the strongest heroes don't need a title." The camera pulled back even further, revealing the expansive garden and the bustling city beyond, both worlds converging as Jason and Claire walked together, equals in a world that had once kept them apart. And in that moment, Jason knew this was his new beginning. If you enjoyed Jason and Claire's incredible journey from a quiet life in the mud to walking side by side in a mansion garden, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section. What did you think about how Jason's life changed after meeting Claire? Do you think she made the right decision offering him that opportunity? And how do you feel about how it all ended? Drop a comment below and let us know what you feel about Jason's transformation. Tell us what you think Claire gained from this journey. Share how you'd rate this story on a scale of 1 to 10. And don't forget to tell us where in the world you're watching from. We'd love to know. Let's talk about it. Was this ending satisfying to you? Did Jason deserve the life he walked into? Did Claire's soul truly find healing? Tell us your take on the story. Your voice matters here.